Hey guys, welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner-Dean. And today we are going to be doing oil color charts, how to swatch, create color charts, and evaluate your oil paints. And today we're going to be using LUKAS 1862 oils, which if you were lucky enough to be one of the 500 sample recipients, you have your little color pack, and we're going to use those in just a little bit to kind of talk about swatching and do some practicing with it so you can actually do it with us. Now, I'm going to tell you now to give you time to go get it if you don't have it handy and you've got your pack and you're going to play along. Go ahead and get yourself a white. I'm using titanium white here and a black. It doesn't really matter which black, but we've got the LUKAS 1862 Ivory Black. So those things are going to help you kind of evaluate your paint. And we will we'll give you guys time to kind of do that real quick while we talk some about this. And remind you guys, the self-portrait contest, it ends on April 12th. So
entry ends on April 12th.
Yes, I'm sorry. The entry ends April 12th, to clarify. So just, 2 days shy of a month? More than a month to enter. So $5,000 worth of prizes. Winners are announced June 12th. So go to jerrysartorama.com, type in on the keyword section self-portrait. That will pull up that entire page and explain to you how to enter and a little bit about what all the prizes and all that good stuff is. So just to make sure that we remind everybody that that's there and you got time to paint some dinner. So all right, so we've done color theory classes. We've talked about color. We even did some episodes very early on that if this is an episode that concerns you that you may want to see. One was JL20. It was student versus artist grade paint. And we showed watercolor, acrylic, and oil. And we talked about common misconceptions with, besides kind of knowing what is student grade and what is artist grade or even like the super high-end professional grade. When colors are named certain things, a lemon yellow isn't going to necessarily be the same pigment throughout different manufacturers. So we did Cobalt Blue in oil, right, Katie? We did magenta in magenta, or maybe it was like a rose, one of those.
It was a magenta E-color.
Yes, that involved that in acrylic. And then we did a lemon yellow in watercolor. And we talked about the pigment numbers and what that meant, and that really when you have a particular brand that you like using and either it's unavailable to get that color, maybe they've discontinued it, maybe it's just on sale, the same color name in a different brand and you'd like to try it out, there's some certain things that you need to know and educate yourself on to make sure that you're making a wise purchase. Just having a name like lemon yellow is not going to do it. So that is JL20. That's a really good episode that you really want to watch, regardless of the medium you work in. As long as you're working in color, it's applicable to you. Then the other one is JL35, and it's all about black and white. And we did that we even did acrylic, oil, and watercolor for that as well, didn't we? Because we did all sorts of the kind of lunar black and cool stuff in watercolor. So that's a good way to understand how different whites and blacks work together. How some will be warm, cool. There's kind of some very weird undertones with them. So even difference in textures with some of the heavier bodied paints. So that's a great episode. Again, JL35. At the top of your screen with the description of the show, it'll say see more. If you click on that, there's two different documents shown there. One is all of the shows in chronological order, which this would be easy to find, the JL20 and JL35 that way. The other one is under topic, so you can find what kind of applies to your interests. So, and just because this is oil color charts does not mean that this kind of information can't transcend some into other mediums. Obviously, with watercolor, you're a little more limited because you're not going to be using it in mass tone straight out of the tube, thick like what we'll be doing with some of the oils. But it's still good knowledge to have about color and kind of how to interpret it and how to use it by just reading the tube and seeing what's information is on there. Okay, so Why swatch? I know so many people who have paints right now. You can raise your hand if you want. We're not going to see, so you're not going to be pointed out by anybody. But how many people have paint in their house, in their studio, who have never swatched the colors before? You've bought new colors, you've never used them, or even you've used the color, but you can't figure out why it's not working in the way that you want. How many people have done that? It's something that all of us do. We're artists, we're attracted to color. Just because we have that innate curiosity about it doesn't mean that we have the knowledge about knowing if it's right for us. So with this show, we're going to kind of talk about, kind of demystify some of the things that will help you understand it better, okay? So reasons to swatch. You can actually feel the color. Now, in oil, I think this is definitely where it is kind of the most telling. I always do what's called mass tone when I'm going to do swatches, which means I take the palette knife, I paint a very thin layer with that palette knife, but what that's doing is giving me valuable information about, is this a thick feeling or thinner feeling pigment? Is some, like titanium white is very thick and stiffer than something like an ultramarine blue, which if anybody's ever used an ultramarine blue in oil, there's always excess oil with it. That's just the nature of the beast. And the pigment feels just different, much less body than a titanium white will. So swatching that with a mass tone, with a palette knife, first gives you that feel of how that paint is going to perform before you even get it under a brush, okay? It also is a very valuable tool in discovering dry time about your oils. Obviously, that isn't going to apply in acrylic. Different pigments have different drying rates. The whites dry slower. Typically, a lot of the blacks dry slower. Cadmiums dry quickly. Earth tones dry quickly. And then there's all sorts of stuff in between that's very convoluted that how are you going to know unless you've played with it? So if you do all your swatching within a couple days, you can date and label the swatch. Come back to it each day to see when is that actually starting to become dry to the touch. Because then you'll know if you need to do an underpainting and you've got different colors that you think you'd like to use, you want to select ones that are going to dry much quicker so that you can continue working faster, okay? So that's a good way to tell in mass tone how that works. The next thing that helps you with is it determines how opaque it is, how transparent it is. Even in mass tone, transparent paints, sometimes you'll see a little bit through to the canvas, either canvas pad, canvas panel, whatever you're using. And I suggest you use something that's going to be like what you're painting on, because that's going to A, help you know that dry time on the surface of choice that you already have, and B, it's going to be the same feel, okay? So then after that mass tone, then I just swipe the color itself next to it with the brush. I don't try to thin it down, but I don't try to make it like, okay, well, but I can kind of see the canvas through, so I should paint that on thicker. It's just with a thick loaded brush, without your brush being too dampened in a solvent. You put that on to be able to see how transparent it is, if it's more opaque, if it's semi-transparent, whatever, that's showing you with a white surface how that paint is covering that surface, okay? Then next to it, I do a thinned selection. And you can do this two ways. You can do thinned with just a little bit of solvent, like you would with an underpainting, or you can actually do it with some linseed oil. Just whatever is going to thin that paint to show you even a better example of kind of how well that does when it's been thinned down. If it's still pretty opaque, if it starts getting incredibly transparent with items, again, like the Ultramarine Blue, you know, if it gets that kind of streakier look to it. There's nothing wrong with that. And some people, when they swatch stuff, get frustrated with their paint. There's nothing to be frustrated about. You're determining performance of your paint. So then you know if you need to cover something with a blue, what blue is actually going to be opaque because you've used it already, rather than painting something that's transparent over and over and over and you're getting 4, 5, 6 layers and you're getting really frustrated because this needs to get done and why isn't this working? Okay, you've taken, this is your fail safe, you've taken the guesswork out. And a lot of people will say, this is a waste of paint.
Learning.
So is trying to mix a light color and you use too much white, so you keep adding more and more, like if you're mixing a pink and adding more and more and more and more, and it's not changing anything, and you've just used a bunch of white, and then you used half of a tube of red to get it to that point because you didn't try first just with one shade with a 50% black and a tint with a 50% white to kind of give you an idea of what that strength of that paint is. Some reds are punch you in the face. Some are so weak that you really need to add only a touch of white. This is what you'll learn with swatching, okay? You can't say that you wasted paint because this is a, is it a 40 mil tube? 37 mil tube. This is how much is still left from this ivory black that was used to do all 70 colors of LUKAS. Well, I mean, I didn't do the metallics with the black. That's how much of this paint tube is left. Okay, so, and that's with a half and half. Obviously, I was not generous with the black. I was doing just enough to make that swatch, but that's how little you need, okay? So before you worry about paint wasting, valuable tool, invaluable tool. All right, and this is the white that I have, which I expected I would need more white in. Now I have a giant white, so that's fine. All right.
Never a problem.
So yeah, right. So the next thing that you want to, that this is a good way to learn is when we talked a few minutes ago about lemon yellow. That could mean a number of different things. One manufacturer might make it with one specific pigment. Another manufacturer might put 3 different pigments together to make what they call the trade name lemon yellow. When you're mixing and you know that you need kind of to make maybe a green, which lemon yellow typically is a very kind of greenish yellow, so that's a good color to go to. The lemon yellow you have may be really opaque because it's got a ton of pigments in it. Well, if that's the case, it's not going to make a very good green because the more pigments that are in it, and that's the other reason for looking at this, the more it's like, if you've got a shaker and you put ping pong balls in it and marbles and those little kind of things that you can freeze for ice cubes, right? And then you put some tiny little pebbles and then you shake it up. Light is not going to filter through that as nicely if it's all one size, right? Okay, because pigments refract light. That was a bad analogy. I don't know where that came from. I'm really tired and I've got a cold. So the more pigments you have in something, the more the refraction is going to go everywhere. Okay, and if the color is already an opaque color and it's got 4 pigments in it, when you add it to another color that has 1 pigment, 2 pigments, 3 pigments, 4, think of it like a scale. You're going to tilt to your disadvantage on something looking very kind of dirty, dusty. It just doesn't, it's dull, okay? So that's what you want to do when you're looking at paint. So if I've got obviously a gray, like I've got the LUKAS Cold Gray, it's PW5, PG7, PBK7. So PW5 is your Lithopone white. PG7 is phthalo green. PBK7 is ivory black, okay? So, which that's fine in this because it's already a mixed color. You're not going to get a gray without having some white and some black and something else in it. So, but that's a nice way to take something and just, you know, take some of that saturation out by using this. So if you don't know how to look at where the pigments are on your tube, some brands, it's the front. With the LUKAS, it's the side. It says pigment, and then it gives that number right on the side in little writing. If you're like me, you'll need to get your reading glasses out. But put that on your swatches, actually. So then you know. Okay, say you run out of cold gray. Come on. You need cold gray. That's the color you need. Oh my gosh, the store is closed. I can't get an order in time. What am I going to do? If you go back and you've written your numbers down, The PW5 is the opaque white. Okay. The PG7 is the phthalo green. If you've got it, there's a phthalo green and an ivory black. It might take you a little bit of troubleshooting to mix, but you've got the color that you needed. That's why that's important. Okay. It's when you do the swatches, it's very cool because you're like, oh my gosh, PY42. That is yellow ochre. Why? That's in there. What? You'd be amazed at the things that are in a color that you like and you didn't know why it looked a certain way. All right. So then you're going to do, how does it tint and shade? You're going to add that 50% black or the 50% white. You're going to be able to see very easily. I'm just going to use this as a very quick example. Who knew you'd get a really beautiful muted gray out of Castle Earth? There is no pigment that's violet in that, and yet it makes this beautiful muted gray. Okay, now you can know how to make that and how to use that in your work. Look at how, that's just a really beautiful color out of the Caput Mortem. It's a kind of a nice muted lilac. Look at your selection of pinks that you're going to get. Now, because you've swatched your reds, you know if something's really going to be salmon and not pink, right? There's a use for salmon. That just might not be what you want that minute. And I hear people say, and I've seen even in the group, people saying, well, it doesn't matter. I can mix that color. If you don't have that pigment of the color that you want, you're not getting close to it, okay? You can't make an amalgamy of mixtures that are going to be the same thing and look the exact same and perform the same as a specific pigment in a color that you want. That doesn't mean you have to go out and buy every tube of paint. Okay, nobody can do that. I don't do that. But it means that you can make smart decisions and smart choices on, that's a red I really need. I really need that color. It makes the right pink for me. Okay, so because you've tested it and tried it out and know what it does.
Question.
Yes.
Space Telegrams on YouTube is asking specifically whether this Alizarin Crimson is fugitive. But also, do you notate those kinds of things on your color charts?
I definitely would. If I was doing this, I would put the light fastness rating on it. But I also will not buy stuff that's fugitive. So I don't feel as much of a need to document that. Look at the pigments so that you know if something is fugitive or not. Okay. Again, with LUKAS, they call it Alizarin Crimson. It's not the pigments that are your typical fugitive Alizarin Crimson. Again, trade name. Some people will put Hue, some people won't, but it is not the one that is fugitive. Let me see. It's a 6 to 7 on the blue wool, so that would be good. Is that good or very good? They do stars for their system, and I can't remember. I think the 2 is good and the 3 is very good. So
Sounds right.
So 8 is the highest on the blue. Europeans use a blue wool scale for some things. It's also a way that they rate dyes. Yes.
Lots of people asking what you mean by fugitive.
Okay, good question. So what fugitive is back in the day, there were colors that everybody loved, but they were made of pigments that over time were not light fast. Think of fluorescence. I mean, that's not way back when. Alizarin Crimson used to be a color that was fugitive. Some of the lakes used to be fugitive. But fluorescent is, huh?
They fade. They run away.
Yes. They fade over time. And sometimes some of them even will migrate through a painting because the layers don't work well together.
They run away.
Yes. So that's something that you need to be aware of. That's why light fastness is important. With things like neons, if you're doing, think of it this way, if you are doing work for print, okay, for taking an image of and using it to make cards or things like that, where the work in and of itself is not important, it's fine to use fugitives because you're going to capture it when it's at its most brilliant and bright and all that, then that's fine. If you're making a painting where you're hoping someday it makes it somewhere big and everybody knows you and all that, then you need to pay more attention to your light fastness, okay? Especially if it's commissioned work, because you don't want somebody to buy something and put it in their home in 10 years, you know. Little Timmy is, I don't know, not the colors he was supposed to be. So, all right. So let's look at, does everybody have their samples ready, I'm guessing? Because we've given enough time. We needed to talk about why it was important, okay? And we'll look at some of these colors in a few minutes so you can see kind of where stuff is, where I'm talking about opaque and more transparent, because actually both of these colors, in swatching them, one is very opaque and the other one is kind of semi-opaque. So we can't really see that transparency and the true opacity right next to each other. So we'll look at some different ones. So can you show me what the overhead looks like so I know where I need to put this?
How close would you want me?
I'm
real close right now.
Perfect. We can do it right there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move this. These are wet, but I'm going to move them up so I can put my mixing here. Perfect. Okay. So, gonna get my thinner out here. So what I've done with these is I've written down I'm going to show real quick just and pull it back so you can see. Just keep that there. Okay. So this is cold gray. So I wrote the brand name because that's important. Because again, cold gray is not going to tell you what's in it, right? Cold gray that Gamblin makes might be different than the cold gray that LUKAS makes. So we want that brand on there. We want the color name. We want our color number here. Because, you know, if you've got small people in your studio that are helping you, and when there's 17 greens, a number might be helpful. Then we've got our different pigments that are in that color. Okay, so this is mass tone. So that means right out of the tube with a palette knife, that's kind of a nice, kind of thick little bit, kind of squished on there. Then this is just a couple strokes with the paint thick on the brush right out of the tube. This is thinned with a little bit of mineral spirits. So you can see that's still really opaque, right? You really can't see the white through that. Nice and opaque. This is with 50% black. So see how if you squint, it is a slightly different value, but not super much. And then this is with 50% titanium white. And when we're talking about value, I know we drill it into your heads all the time. See our grayscale? You can put those over it and you can see, whoa, that's pretty good right there. See that? Okay, and then we're getting up when we've got that. I'm afraid to get it too flat. So if you squint, that's almost the same value here to here. So it doesn't increase a whole lot from here. It jumps 10% from it being straight out of the tube with a palette knife. So then I can come back and see how long this takes to dry. I would write on here if this was something, this is going to be in the studio. I don't know when I'll have time to check it next. But if I was doing this at home, I would definitely put the date and time and come back and check it every day and see when there are things drying to the touch. It looks like there's a question, Frida.
I was waiting for a good time to ask,
Okay.
But since you bring it up,
Yeah.
Rhiannon was asking, what kind of setup do you use to save your swatches? How do you make them accessible?
I would hang them on the wall because then they're there right behind your easel so you can refer to them. If you don't have that ability, or you work in multiple mediums where you're not always going to have the oil or the acrylic out or whatever, panels, this is why I did these, because they were where I could carry them from my home studio working on these into work. For this, you can, once those are dry, stand those up and put them out of the way. I would put some Soluvar on it probably. But, okay, the only thing that would be bad about varnishing them, though, is you're going to give it all the same sheen, and you're not going to know some pigments are duller, some pigments are super shiny. So, I would probably varnish it because I know I'm really bad and stuff gets on it because I've got Great Danes and they go, it would need to be able to be washed off. So, But that's a good way to store something because you can store a whole lot of those panels together in a small area and then just pull them out when you're going to paint in that medium. Is there another question, Frida? You have the question face.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
We also talked about, like, for other mediums, we have, like, people who have journals and, like, sketchbooks of swatches.
Yeah.
Or somebody has, like, a huge 3-ring binder of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. No, that's perfect. Well, and, you know, if you did it on canvas panels, a 3-ring binder would be fantastic because you could actually, or not canvas panels, canvas pads.
Or
Where it
oil
just flips.
paper.
Or oil paper. But oil paper is going to be very absorbent and be very different feeling than canvas. So, which if you paint on oil paper, that's fine, but that's going to throw some of the sheen off, the dry time definitely off because it's super absorbent.
You
So,
want to make sure you're swatching on the same substrate that
Right.
you're going to actually be using so that those swatches
Right.
are giving you an accurate representation.
right. Now I'm putting, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, for those viewers who did not get the samples, what 2 colors are we using?
All right. So what came in the sample pack is Cadmium Yellow Light. Okay. Which is number 0026. And then Cyan Blue, which is their primary blue. Okay. Now, obviously the Cadmium Light is PY35 for pigment. The Cyan, see if they can pick this one out. And I'm not going to say, and no cheating and looking it up. If you don't know it, that's fine. PW6 and PB15 3. I won't play game show music while you weigh in on that. All right, so we're starting with the cadmium. Yes, Amanda.
Can you explain the difference between the color number that you have and the pigments that are involved? And how they may not, well, the color numbers don't transfer across brand lines?
Yeah, I thought that we did talk about that. It must be
Can
somebody
you
came in
explain
late.
it again?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at let's look at these real quick, and then we'll go to that. Okay, because the people that got their samples want to practice this, and then as we're looking at the colors and talking about stuff, that will give us the best chance of looking at those and kind of deciphering that. So hold on to that thought, and we'll make sure we do this. All right, I'm gonna put this here because it's just nice and easy to see. Okay, so all I did was pick that up. I like it to be a little thick because then I can kind of see how the dry time is going to be with that.
Is that why you're using a palette knife instead of a brush?
We're going to do the brush in a minute because this is mass tone. Okay, so what this means is in a thick, which you can do as what they call a draw down, which I'm going to take this. In a draw down, you take the color, you have it, and then you pull it across to see, you know, how thin it gets over whatever you're doing. That's not really, although that's helpful sometimes, it's not really letting you play with it while you determine kind of some features of the paint. So, so first I'm going to do that mass tone with a palette knife. And that's a nice thick amount, Frida. So it makes it easier for me to check drying times, okay? Which, from painting and experience, I know that cadmiums dry very, very fast. So we're good to go with that. Now I'm going to take the brush. See how I dipped it in solvent a little bit, not to thin it, but just to make it so that it's going to come out of my brush easier. Okay, now see, that's just the brush stroke with that thick paint. You can see some brush strokes. It's got a little body to it. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the solvent. Take a little bit of that out. See how this is a much thinner, more like an underpainting wash. Then I'm going to put that on right next to it. You can see because it's kind of splashy right there. Now before you, at AOC, I got a chuckle out of the students. They were putting with wads of paint. Don't do that. That you will be changing solvent out over and over again. So even take that kind of get as much pigment out as you can.
Which solvent are you using there?
I know that one of these that I had open a little earlier was the Chelsea Classical Studios, the lavender.
Yeet.
That's mineral spirits. And yes, I can smell odorless mineral spirits. So, all right. So back to our colors here. We already have the full strength right there. See, you can see how that's the wash. See, it's not quite as saturated as this, right? It's kind of the sunshine yellow. It gets a little bit lighter, and then it gets light there with thinning. So I've got my black and I've got my white. I'm going to just eyeball my 50-50. And this is something as you do these, you'll get better and better as you go. So it doesn't have to be exact. Now this is where you see titanium white's usually incredibly strong, but cadmiums, because they're so opaque, the more opaque a paint is, the less that color is going to change when you actually are playing with it. Okay, so there's my white mixed in. See, it's almost the same kind of value as that. It looks much more lemony, doesn't it? Now, pigments can be a tricky thing in that cadmium yellow of any kind is going to be the PY35, okay? But they can heat treat different pigments to make them darker, to make them lighter. So just because it's a PY35 doesn't mean that a cadmium lemon with PY35 is going to be the same thing as a cadmium lemon or a cadmium yellow medium. Okay, so that's one thing you need to consider, and that's why this is good to play with this. Okay, and different brand names will call things different things. So this is cadmium yellow light. It may be darker in one brand versus another brand. It's just, that's why every tube of paint you get, you actually swatch it and kind of see. Okay, so now we've got our black. It's the ivory black. See how this is making a really dark green? I'm just picking up the pigment and then I'm pushing it down because this pushes the color kind of together. Okay. See, still very opaque, but definitely a nice dark value. So people always want to, when we've talked about in different kind of some of our demo lessons that we do, people have talked about shadows. Everybody always wants to make a shadow black or brown or something like this. If you're painting a bright color, you're painting lemons or something like that, and it's on a table, and there's a really bright highlight, and then it's got a really dark shadow, use some black and make a dark color. This passes as a black if we use our gray value chart. See how that's almost, if you squint, that's almost a black, right? Like a total 100% value. It's right in between. So that would be a good way of, because what that does to the viewer is that carries the color through without them realizing it, and it makes your painting stronger. Okay? But without having added that black, you don't know what a 50% black is. So now you know if you want kind of this earthy green, use less black. Okay? So, but it gives you good information to be able to extrapolate. If I want this to be kind of a greeny color, use a little bit less black. If I want this to be lighter, obviously if this is 50% white, I'm going to need a lot more white to make this super light, like a super light yellow. Do we need to do that just to prove that real quick?
Might as well.
Okay. But we do want to get to the other colors. Okay, so that's my So what I'm going to do is put dot of yellow, bigger amount of yellow. This is a quarter yellow to 3/4 white, and I put this in my paint. Then I'm going to take my black and it's about roughly a quarter of the black to the yellow. Okay, where did my blade go? All right. Now see how that's significantly lighter, but it's still pretty yellow, isn't it?
More like butter.
Like a really dark butter. Margarine. It's kind of like margarine, that kind of synthetic color. All right. So this is lighter than that. That was our 50%. Okay. So that's going up to 25%. Do we want to stick that on there just to be able to see it? See if I can do it without disturbing the... It's not significantly lighter, is it? All right. So now we're going to see what this green makes with a little bit of less black. Reminds me a little bit of Bohemian Earth, or a really more yellow olive green. See the difference? Okay. So we know from testing that there's a lot of saturation in that cadmium yellow. It's very opaque, right? Even with adding the white, it doesn't lighten a lot. Part of that is the opacity. Okay, and it's just, cadmium is just really strong. We talk about phthalos being punch you in the face. Cadmiums are kind of the same way. All right, so now we want to try the blue. Let me get rid of this so I don't accidentally put my brush in yellow.
We're using lamp or ivory black.
We're using ivory black. They do not, LUKAS does not make a lamp black. And that's the other thing. As we look at these, you're going to see you don't need black for everything. You can you can use black, but use a color in with it. It takes very minuscule bits of black to take a color and darken that value of it. So it's always in your best interest to use black sparingly if you're going to use it at all, because that will strengthen your work significantly.
BP is wondering if the palette pad absorbs any of the moisture out of the paint. No? Okay.
Here, I'm going to hold it up so they can see. This is the under it. I can see a little starting to, where some mineral spirits were added, starting to kind of dot the back of it, but it's not. It's a pretty substantial palette paper. It's got a very unique surface that doesn't, like some of the old ones, it either leaches through or they're so plasticky that your paint's really slippery on it.
It's not like a laminated.
Yes.
worksheet.
All right, I'm going to slide that up again. Now, also for the record, I used framer's tape to section this. You can't really see it because it's white. To section the stuff off, so when I took it off, you'll see in a little bit when we look at these other ones. It's nice and clean and pretty. And then if you kind of overspray, it's not kind of go off on the side, something stops it, and then you can pull it up and it's got a nice clean border to it. Okay. So, you know what? I didn't think to do it with the yellow, and we've kind of gone all around. Where did I put my pen? Okay, so this is LUKAS 1862. And it's Cyan Blue. Putting a PE for primary. PW6. Did we figure out what it was?
Which one?
PW6, did they figure out what it was?
Oh, did they?
Isn't it a white?
It is, because it's PW, that's pigment white.
Titanium white?
Zinc white is PW4. It's not wanting to.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, so zinc white is PW4, titanium white is PW6. Okay, so it's titanium white, PB15-3 is one of the phthalo blues. PB15 is phthalo blue. It just depends on the manufacturer.
There's so many shades.
Because it's their own kind of interpretation of it, which that's the other thing about phthalos, is it's the interpretation of the color. Oh, and I need to put the color number on here, right? So 10120. All right, so I've got my paint laid out. I'm gonna actually put a little bit more out because we'll do the lighter tinting there. That seems like a lot. Look how much is still in this tube, and these tubes are little 20 milliliter tubes. It looks like a lot of paint, but it's not. Okay. All right. White, black, and I'm gonna do. Yep, almost put another smidge of black there. All right, so I'm gonna put my 50% there. Come on. 50% there. Mix those real quick. And we'll just put it all on at the same time. There's no right or wrong way to do this, as long as you're remembering which one you're doing when. So you can see the phthalo in that. Look how blue it is. Now that has that little bit of white in it. It's just to make it slightly lighter, okay? Because phthalo is really deep, right? And really dark, the value of phthalo, typically. Same, the PB15-3. I'm just putting this up here for reference. That is the same pigment that's in that, but without the white. So you can see the difference of value, right? This is much lighter. So see, if you've got the phthalo blue and you've got the white and you've got the little bit of time to practice with the mixing, you can make this color on your own without having to buy the cyan. Knowledge is power. Okay. What? It is, Katie. It is. Okay, this is the quarter blue. It almost looks like a Prussian blue, just grayer looking. Okay. Just a snippet of this. This is a quarter to the white. Now I'm scraping that up. It's what that weird sound is, but I'm actually picking it up and then pressing it together. And you can do it that way if you want, but that starts to make my wrist sore. All right. So, oops, not clean, Amy. Okay, so with our palette knife, right? And you can see in that streak there that's that phthalo influence, where you can see kind of a little bit of some transparency there, right? But that white's giving it the opacity. For this, when you do that with that mass tone, it's much more opaque, right? Okay, so there's our palette knife, brush, straight from the... Now you can start seeing a little bit more of where that's not completely opaque, right? You can see some of the canvas through there. Now we're going to take it, add that little bit of solvent. Okay, so see that wash is only slightly kind of just that little bit more thin. Okay, and I'm just going to pick this other stuff up with the, so this was our 50% white, so I'm making a larger thing of that. 50% white. .75% white. See, phthalo is very strong. You would expect if you're putting 75% white on something like here that that would be a lot lighter, wouldn't you? But that's how you know, in playing with it, that you know that phthalo is incredibly strong.
So I need to point out that on YouTube, M. Tiffany knew that the white pigment was titanium white, and I just missed it in the chat there. I know, I failed. I'm sorry.
Feel free to hassle her.
Please don't.
Yeah, don't. All right. There we go with the 50-50 with black. Now with the 25% black. See, that's a, you really can see the blue with that. Well, can they see it, or is my monitor makes everything look really dark?
Easier.
Okay. All right, then if you use specific mediums like linseed oil or anything else, that's the time to maybe add a separate section just to see how glossy that makes it, what that looks like thinned versus just the solvent, because that solvent's gonna dry and it's gonna be more matte, right? Because I've taken a lot of the oil out of the paint itself. So that's another thing that if you do paint with different, like a fat medium, a lean medium, just oil, straight fat, add a little bit of that on there just to give yourself some more information. Okay, so let's look at some of these colors. Frida, do you have a question?
No.
Okay, just the question face.
That's just her face.
I am not permanently confused. Thank you very much.
Question and confused are very different, Frida. It's all right. Oh, before we do that, so how about LUKAS? We've had some new colors made with them. They are not here yet, but I just got to test them the other day. So I would be happy to show you after I get the silver off my finger.
So they're seeing it here for the very
They're
first
seeing
time?
it here for the very first time. So if you put the overhead on, Katie, I will... there we go. Okay, I'm gonna
Push it up a little bit.
do this first.
Do you want me to zoom in so
What
you
we
can
did
move
is
it
took
around?
different colors that are very popular in other brands that a lot of people have interest in. This is ice blue. Yeah, if you can zoom in, because then I'll just move the thing around. Ice blue. So we've got just like we did before, and look, this is dry because I did this a while ago. So we've got it thinned out, we've got it with white, and we've got it with black. Cobalt teal, Katie. Yeah. It's the teal. That's nice and shiny. That still feels a little tacky. So I know that this dries faster, so I will need to remember that. So we've got the white, the black, it thinned. Okay. Transparent colors are the thing to mix with because that transparency helps make the colors much more clean and clear and gem-like. Transparent Oxide Red. So we've got that, which is PR 101. Like a lot of other things, like you know, red oxide, all those things, PR 101 is a very popular color. Look at this beautiful color that makes with white.
That's beautiful.
It's just gorgeous. With the black, I would do a little bit less black. It makes almost like a burnt umber looking color, right? So you could actually get by with that if you run out of umber. Just use a little less black. That suddenly has that look of burnt umber. Then transparent oxide yellow. So PY43, PR 101. PR 101 is that red oxide. And then this, I believe, is yellow oxide, which 42 is the yellow ochre, but 43 is oxide. So look at the nice colors that makes. This is a great, would be nice for a shadow for skin tones or things like that, where it's not like the complete undershadow, but like even reflected light coming up on the bottom of a jaw or something like that. Yellow ochre light. So that's a nice, pretty lighter yellow ochre. This is a beautiful color. Permanent rose. PV19. PV is what? Pigment violet. Good job. Right? So we've got that. This is a lovely color. Quinacridone magenta. This is really nice too. Then there is a quinacridone red. That's got that rose color in it, the pigment violet. And then it's got a red in it. Then there's brown pink. Yay, brown pink. I love brown pink.
There's some pretty colors.
Look at this nice kind of terracotta. It's like pinker terracotta color. I love that. And then a Naples yellow light. So all the colors that you love in other brands, they are bringing it to us. We should have them. I'm not sure when. Deidre didn't have a time frame for me, but they've been approved.
Coming soon.
Because I was like, yes, thank you very much, please. We would like these colors. Or rather, Amy would like these colors, so the rest of you would. All right, so let's look at some of these. What do we want to start with? Reds, yellows, blues, greens.
Blue.
All right. I should have known. I should have
What
just
do you
What
have?
kind
guessed.
of question is that, Amy?
Why do you ask Frida about a color? It's always blue. Okay, well this is good because we've got our phthalo here. Okay, so now is going to be the time to talk about hues first. Okay, so right here we have Cobalt Blue and we have a Cobalt Blue hue. See how the mass tones are pretty similar, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
This looks a little more maybe reddish, a little violety, right? But when you start thinning, look at what the big differences are. Okay? If you use it where you're using a wash, you're going to have a little bit of issue with that being a little dark. They perform very similar with black. To me, this is much more gray of the two. It's not as bright and bold. This can be attributed to a number of things. One of them is, what do we see here that we see here? What's the difference? It's not the same pigment numbers, clearly, but what is the difference? Single pigment versus two pigments, right? So that refraction is going to be a little brighter. It's going to give it a little more pop. This is just visually slightly duller, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want cobalt in your house, you know, you have studio assistants that are four-legged that like to carry stuff off. You don't want them eating cobalt, clearly. So but knowing that, because you've tried it against the other one, okay, is this all right being just a little grade, a little less bright versus that Cobalt Blue? Okay, phthalo, when we talk about phthalo having that pop, super deep and rich, still pretty deep and rich, a little bit transparent. You can see a little bit of transparency, semi-transparent. More transparent here, but this is already dry to the touch for the most part. That was from a different blue. looks nice with, I like it with black. That's pretty. It's very, like a super deep Prussian. And on the edges, you probably can't see it, but you can see a little bit of kind of that transparency of the phthalo, that little blue undertone showing through the blue. And that makes a really pretty blue right there. And that's a single pigment versus the cyan that we looked at. I'm just turning it like this. But see what the differences are with that white in it? Not super duper, but just a little brighter to me. Okay. Ultramarine. Oh, they're ultramarine. This is one of them. I've got like 4 favorite colors of LUKAS. Their treatment of ultramarine is really beautiful. Okay. For one, you've got the creaminess of the paint, which a lot of ultramarines and other brands are kind of sloppy feeling. That little bit of the beeswax in there gives it a little nice body. So a pigment that normally would be a little kind of squishier to handle has a little bit more control to me. I like how it's got more of a red tone than some other brands of ultramarine. Can you see that red undertone? They're Prussian Blue here. This is a gorgeous color with that white. That's beautiful. Paris Blue. When I first used that, I was like, isn't that Prussian? But it's not. It's got that little bit kind of the red versus the little bit of green undertone. So these would be nice to have played with, so you know, for, you know, doing water and things like that, kind of what that look is. Indigo, look at that. That makes like a really nice grade violet. And then the blue black makes a grade kind of a green. So that's very nice. In mass tone, these all pass for black if you're not really looking. Ultramarine Violet. Again, ultramarine is kind of a squishy, squirrely pigment. Just because of how it's ground, this plays really nice. You're not fighting to get it to lay down like you do in some other brands. Makes a very pretty violet. This is beautiful. Now this is a Cobalt Violet Hue. And PV23 is what, dioxazine? Pretty sure that's dioxazine. And if you're curious about what the colors are, you can either go to a website called artistcreation.com and you click on the color and then it pulls up all these numbers and you can click on it that way. But it's just as easy to do a Google search and put in capital P, capital V, 23 right together. It'll pull up just whatever that pigment name is. So you all carry phones with you. Everybody uses it for social media. Use it to educate yourself on pigments. Mauve, another hugely favorite color. Look at this. Remember, Katie, we were looking at the mauve and the acrylic, but look how beautiful that is.
It's so pretty.
Yes. And then the magenta primary makes a nice little bright pink. And the mass tone of it is gorgeous. This is just simply beautiful.
It's interesting because you think those two colors would make more of a similar pink when
Right.
you're looking at it in mass tone, and then you see
Yes.
how different they are.
Yes, you would. All right, reds. It's right here, so let's look at that real quick. All right, this would be the board that I would go to when I wanted to find a pink. Okay, you can see as things get more orange, more salmon-y, kind of, right? The cadmium red light makes a really nice, more of a salmon color. So for those deeper pinks, you're going to want to go with the higher number reds, or you're going to want to go to those colors that have like maybe some of the quinacridone pigments and stuff in it, because they're going to be pinkier. The stuff that are the lower numbers, it seems like, tend to start airing more on the orange side, just in experience. The cadmium orange makes a really pretty kind of like popsicle-y color. Look at this. This would be beautiful for a flesh tone. That's permanent orange, but it's really, really nice. Indian yellow. This is when we're talking about a much more transparent color. That's the one swipe that I did with kind of a heavier loaded brush. Very transparent there. In mass tone, see, you can see as it's starting to kind of set up, some of that's even still kind of transparent. Okay. Permanent yellow deep, just like the permanent orange, makes a very nice skin tone. There's your cads where it's much more opaque. And again, that cadmium yellow makes a really pretty green, like that really dark green, like for shadows in an evergreen tree or something. All right, the browns are, we showed those really quickly, but we're going to look at them real fast because some of those tints make some really beautiful gray values. The Castle Earth, the Van Dyke Brown makes a really nice, kind of almost like a medium gray. And that's just Pigment Brown 7, so this was a really nice surprise in that this to me doesn't really look all that gray. In a mass tone, it's really a really black brown. But look at all, that's got 3 pigments in it. But I'm guessing that those are mostly transparent pigments, and that's why that color is still much more vibrant. Okay, because the more transparent, the easier it is for the light to refract off those colors. We talked about that PR 101. Look how much browner that is. This is the difference in heat treating a pigment. Same pigment as that more reddish one. See, that's why you can't just go, okay, well, it's a PR 101, so those are all going to be the same. No, there's like 10 different versions of that, probably more than that in paint. See, PR 101. Look at the difference in those. And this is obviously an opaque one, not a transparent one, because we've played with it, and look, those are very opaque there. Raw Sienna. Now, the Raw Sienna and the Van Dyke Brown are the same pigment. Look at the difference in color. Look how much more yellow this is.
I love that raw sienna.
Yes, I do too. And I love that burnt umber light color as well as the burnt sienna. Look how beautiful those are for skin tones. Look at this. That'd be nice, like in the shadow of lips or something like that, or even around the eyes. Caput mortem. That's a very opaque color, but it goes PR 101 again. Doesn't look anything like this, does it? Okay. PR 83. This is the Alizarin Crimson. Look at the pretty kind of pink that makes, and this is a beautiful kind of underpainting color. That's really nice. Look at how radiant that pink is. That's like a screaming hot pink, and it's a very, very hot red, which obviously this looking like this and being more kind of magenta-y like, that would make a much better violet versus a color like some of those ones that we looked at, like the permanent red or the vermilion or things like that are more orangey. Even the Cad Red Deep has a little bit to me, except in mass tone, it's starting to get a little like it might make a nicer orange than a violet. Okay, here's one of the Madder Lakes, a much more transparent color, but look what a nice color that makes with that white. So the reason that you're going to want to do this is you see this and you think, oh, I know what that'll look like with more white, right? You don't have to sit and make all of them first and check. You just can kind of look at these and go, I need a really light pink, but I need it to kind of look like one of these, obviously lighter. So you've got the base and you just know that's the one that you add more white to. What were they asking about was there something that I said we were looking at greens, or just when we were talking about all of the different?
They were asking about the difference between the pigment number, the color number, the color name, like between brands. So like,
Okay.
is color number the same? Pigment number should be the same across the board, but color number is
Probably, but in the phthalo blues, it could be 3 different, more, I think even 5 different
right.
phthalos.
Depending on what the manufacturer discloses.
Right. All right, so look at, I can't fit them both on the thing. These two,
Can you zoom out?
yes, just a little bit. So Manganese Blue, they call theirs Manganese Blue Cerulean. Okay, so it's got the cerulean in it, the PV36, but they put PG7 in there, which is phthalo green. Okay, see how that gives it more of a green look like manganese, but without it being manganese, which isn't something that's easy to get or really the best health-wise, I believe. So it gives it kind of that look, but it's a cerulean with a little bit of phthalo, just to green it up a little bit. Turquoise could be anything, because turquoise is just whatever that manufacturer's evaluation of turquoise is, right? Emerald green is the same. Different people are going to make it different ways. This is with a phthalo and that PW5, which is the lithopone white. Other manufacturers, it'll be much more green. Okay, this is a slightly blue, and actually, this is one of the colors I detest. I like their version of it because it's got a little bit of blue in it, but it's not like an unnatural color. Some of the emerald greens are so unnatural, it just looks like aqua to me, you know? So this is a very nice variation of that. Sap green. That's a good example of a trade name of a color that it's whatever the interpretation is from people. We've got PY42, which is yellow ochre, PY83, which I can't remember, and PG7.
You don't know all of them?
There's so many yellows. I mean, I can look it up on my phone. PG7 is that phthalo, right? So it makes a really nice green. In mass tone, this is much lighter because of probably, I'm wondering what that yellow is, if it's a pretty light yellow. But this is lighter. A lot of people's sap green is more black. Yes, ma'am.
PY83 is Indian yellow.
Okay. So look at that. So if we had our yellow ochre, we had their Indian yellow, and we had their phthalo green, make your own version of a sap green. And if you wanted it a little darker, like more like some trade names of that, add that little bit of black into it. This is a nice version of like a darker sap green. But I like this because sap green's so dark and then it's transparent. It's weird to mix some of the ones that are single pigment. So I like this variation of it. And they've got a cobalt green. And look at that beautiful color that it makes. All right. So,
real quick, did you say
yes.
there was beeswax in the ultramarine blue that we showed earlier?
There is, okay, so for LUKAS, and if you've not used LUKAS before and you didn't get one of the sets, if you've used Gamblin or you've used Winsor Newton, it's going to be a similar performing paint, only it's going to be creamier. Winsor Newton to me sometimes is a little wet, like a little slippery, which I don't like. LUKAS has a really nice body to the paint. Gamblin's a little drier, but that saturation of pigment is going to be similar to what you're used to working with. The body is just enhanced by the beeswax. Also, LUKAS dries 2 to 4 days on average to the touch, not like dry and varnish it and go. But for an oil paint, that's huge. Okay, so that's even saying whites, that you're not, you know, using a palette knife to slap on like 2 inches of white. That is done by a mixture of, they use a cold press, a very highly refined cold pressed linseed oil, and then they use sunflower oil. Sunflower oil is used, like in other brands, they'll use poppy seed or safflower. Sunflower oil is used to keep the colors light, to keep either your oil paint from not yellowing, which everybody usually has some concern about. Instead of being more brittle like a poppy seed oil, safflower is not as brittle, but it's not as flexible. Sunflower is kind of the next best thing to straight linseed oil, so it's still got a good film adhesion and strength and flexibility, but it's going to keep those yellows and the light blues and your whites and things from yellowing over time. And remember, there was that test online, and I should have pulled up the website, where somebody on their own tested every brand of white oil paint, and the LUKAS 1862 was the one that did not yellow. Everything else, some of them were scary. Some of them looked like buttercream.
Yeah.
Over, I don't even remember what it was it a year? Was it 6 months? It was something where it was just like, these other ones should not have happened. Now, I don't remember the particulars of, you know, if they stored it in a closet or they kept it out in the light, but still that those did that, that's a huge concern if you've got stuff where you're painting with a lot of lighter colors. So LUKAS is awesome for that. Like most manufacturers, triple milled, where they've got the triple rollers that really grind that pigment in with the oil so that it keeps a nice body rather than that separation that sometimes happens. And I'm trying to think of what else. I'm doing this without my thing because I feel like after doing all these swatches, I know. But the performance is great. The color saturation is fantastic. The biggest difference between this and other brands is that 52 of the 70-something colors are a Series 1. And if you're not familiar with that, you've probably only been buying student grade paint where it's a one price fits all. Series are when a pigment is more expensive, there will be different levels of pricing, right? And it's remarkable because for 52 of 70 colors, it's a Series 1, which means that's the lowest price. That makes it incredibly economical. Okay, so you get lots of color, packs a punch, and obviously a little bit goes a long way. If we've still got that much even after the mixing now. Any final questions? Please tell me there's no diehard people who are like, not gonna swatch, it's wrong.
No,
'Cause-
everybody was saying
No,
thank you for doing all
actually.
the work for it. And
because it's the invaluable lesson you will learn from playing with each color. Like I said, cadmiums are stiffer. Titanium might be stiffer. You know, some of the things like the ultramarine is much more fluid and liquid and loose. It's a great way of kind of knowing your paint intimately
you learn a lot.
before you paint.
Yeah.
It saves time, it saves money, it saves beating your head against the
Yeah.
literal proverbial wall of your studio because you've done some of the guesswork ahead of time.
Can you reiterate why you would want to buy so many different colors of paints as opposed to just mixing them all yourself?
Okay, when you're starting out, it's understandable that you want to buy as few tubes as possible and just mix. You want to revisit some of our color theory episodes to, if you're going to approach it in that way, to learn what colors you need, hot colors and cool colors of your primaries, to be able to make those secondary colors properly where they're not going to look off, because red and blue don't make violet, yellow and blue don't always make green. Okay, it has to do with color temperature and how they perform together. That being said, there are colors you'll never be able to make. And that was the point of writing all these pigment numbers down, is you could see, like with that sap green, not everybody's got that formulation of sap green, but if you've got these other colors in this brand, if you've done all this practice, you might be able to figure out really easy, if you run out of your sap green, how to kind of make it for yourself with those other colors, because those are LUKAS's pigments that they're making into that color. Okay, you're not going to get some of these really bright reds. You're not going to get the quinacridone, the same look as the quinacridones, as you're not going to be able to mix that because it's not the right pigment. It doesn't reflect the light the same way. It is, even if it's in mass tone, looks kind of similar, I guarantee you it's not going to work the same. So that's the only, and this line makes it easy to own more colors because of that great price point to it for a professional paint.
Also, they're so pretty.
They are. In looking at the box, I think I posted a picture of the box because I was like a little, all those new tubes, because obviously I buy stuff as stuff runs out. I haven't seen that many new tubes in a long time. And it was like, don't want to open. So stressful. And then I was like, wah,
Rip the Band-Aid off.
more, the next color, wah, yeah. So, all right. Well, hopefully you learned a lot. Go definitely look back at that JL20 with the student versus artist grade paint. That will delve more into why pigments are important. And also the JL35, all about black and white, because we used titanium white and we used ivory black. There's so many others. So it's good to know those differences in them, to know which white and black are good for specific purposes. Okay? Next week, it's St. Patrick's Day. And we are doing all about green.
Okay, speaking of all the colors,
All about green. And we'll use acrylics next week. But like I said, just because this is oils doesn't mean this can't translate to other mediums as well as far as swatching. Okay? All right. Well, you guys have a great week. And we'll see you on St. Patrick's Day. Take care.